many of our conferences, and we're delighted to have him today to share his expertise on how to make design more effective. So, Henry, take it away.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, everybody, for coming today to listen to this talk. Um, I have done quite a few of these in the past, and if you have your premium uh, password for the knowledge base, there's recordings of many of these that I've done in the past as well in the ArtsReach knowledge base. So what I'm going to talk about today is our 7 common design problems that all arts marketers face, and then I'm going to bring them out, give them a little bit more flesh on the bones with 3 case studies that I used at the Los Angeles conference earlier this year. Unfortunately, none of the 3 people who were my partners for those case studies were able to make it today, so you're only going to be hearing it from my point of view. Normally, when I do these Expert Eye webinars, we have the executive director or the marketing director in on the call so we can have a discussion about it, which is usually very illuminating, but we're going to soldier on. So the number one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of a rule of thumb or a problem that everyone faces is to think about what is the first and foremost job of any brochure that you create, and it has to answer these 2 questions. What is it, and why do I care? They have to be able to very quickly, within just a few seconds, understand what it is that they're looking at. Are they so, for example, this particular orchestra's brochure, I think, is very misleading because you don't know, 5 batons, 1 podium, your vote. I don't know what that means. I don't know whether this is a company that sells batons or sells podiums, or is it an orchestra? Is classical music involved in here in some way? It's just very misleading, and I don't know why I should care about 5 batons. That doesn't tell me anything about the experience that I'm going to have if I choose to come to one of their events. So I thought this one did not do this very basic job. This choral group's brochure also, I think, failed, even though it's doesn't suffer from the same problems as the other one. I think the problem that it suffers from is they were so enamored of the slogan, of the theme, of time and season, that they ended up creating in this case, a postcard that looked to me much more like it came from a bank than from an arts organization. So I think if I were getting this in my mail and just sorting through, I would throw it away because it wouldn't engage my interest if I'm a choral arts enthusiast. Now, I thought the San Francisco Symphony's brochure from a few years ago did an excellent job of saying, what is it? Why do I care? I see Michael Tilson Thomas there. The maestro, of course, that's the cliche, is that every orchestra has the maestro on the cover. But, it happens for a reason, because it communicates the idea that this is a symphony orchestra. San Francisco Symphony's name is very clear about what it is. And then I loved their slogan that year, "Nothing beats being here," because it was a direct answer to the question of, well, why can't I just get a San Francisco Symphony MP3 download and listen to the symphony in the comfort of my own home? Because nothing beats being here. So why do I care? Because I want to find out more about what being there is like. The second one that here we go. I think I went too far. There we go. The second major issue that comes up with design is the need of every design, whether it's the cover of a brochure or it's if it's an email or if it's a website or it's any given page within a brochure. Every layout has to have a focal point. There has to be a thing that the person reading it is going to be drawn to look at first. And why is that? Because it makes the reader more. It invites the reader in. It makes them more comfortable looking at what it is you're trying to communicate to them. They know where to begin, rather than have the anxiety of having to figure out. Like on this particular brochure, this Goodspeed Musicals brochure, I don't know what to look at first, because in the picture, the bridge and then the venue, that 4-story building is the venue, are competing for my attention. So is Goodspeed Musicals across the top, and so are the 5 show logos along the side. I don't know what to look at first, and so I find this kind of stressful to look at. I suggested to them, just pick one thing to be the focal point. So I recommended, well, why not blow up the image of the venue, allow that to be the thing people look at first, and then people's attention will then be drawn to the left in this particular layout to look at the title or alternatively the 5 show logos. That they're really committed to having the bridge in the photo. So the best I could get them to do in reality was to add world-class theater spectacular setting on the cover of their brochure. So at least people understood, the why should I care part, because it's a world-class theater in a spectacular setting. And here's another example from the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra. They did a campaign one year where they participated in this campaign of having public pianos around, and they went around and took pictures of people interacting with the pianos, and they thought, well, they got in so much media attention because of this that they used it as the cover of their season brochure the following year, thinking that was a good time, which was good thinking. It was a good idea. It was a good campaign. It was very successful for them. But the problem with the implementation is that, again, I don't have a focal point on it. I don't know what to look at first. I've got 4 pictures, which I'm sure, every picture was very precious to the designer and to the people that took the pictures, but it doesn't help the reader that I can't tell what it is I'm looking at. I don't know if I'm looking at a piano brochure, a company company that sells pianos, or if I'm looking at a after-school program or what. I don't know what it is, and I don't have anything to focus on. So I suggested to them they just choose one of the photos to focus on, so that it could be a focal point. So we're drawn into looking at this kid on the piano and his friends looking at them, so we can absorb. We at least know what to look at first, and then we go up and look at the word orchestra, which answers the question of what is it, and then we're the ones who brought you the public piano project. Blame me, I'm yours. So now I know why I care. So it was just a better approach to what was otherwise a very good idea. The focal point doesn't have to be a photo, or an image of some kind. It could be text. So here's a case of the Globe Theatre in London doing a great job of making some text their focal point. We have the milieu of the theater. We see what is in the background, a picture of the Globe Theatre, but our attention is riveted to the 2012 theater season that plays The Thing in the center, and then we look and we take in the rest of it. So I know where to begin and I know what to do after. They didn't do as good of a job on the inside. I just give this as an example of not every designer hits it out of the park every time. So they had one page on the inside where I thought there's equal attractiveness to the 2 sides of this page. So again, I don't know what to look at first. And then there's so much text on the left, it all kind of blends together, unfortunately, even though they worked hard not to. I thought when presenting theaters often have the issue of, they have 60, 80, 100 events at their venue in a year, and so they don't know what to do about the cover. And I thought the Maui Arts and Cultural Center typically does a fairly good job of just picking one event in the year to put on the cover as the focal point. So in this case, it's the gentleman with the guitar, but they give enough of a sampling of the other events throughout the year also on the cover, so that once people are done looking at the having their attention riveted by the guy with the guitar in the center, then they can take in the other images below and get a full understanding of what it is that they've received, much easier than if there wasn't one dominant image. Here's another one of theirs that I think is a little bit less successful, and I'll explain why. But they do have a nice focal point. I do know where to begin. The issue that I have with this one is I don't know where to go next, because all of the energy in the photo is going into the center. So I don't have a visual cue to then look at the photos up at the top. Whereas with the earlier example, the flow of the image was to the left and down, which is exactly where you want people's eyes to head. And so you immediately go over to from the arm of the musician down to the logo and look at these photos along the bottom, and then work your way back up to the Mac Presents. So I thought that was it was still they do it right with the focal points, but that was a better example. Similarly, theater companies and opera companies and dance companies, they often have the issue of, we had 6 productions, 4 productions, 8 productions, and they each have their own identity, and I don't want to make any one of them the dominant one, because they're all equally important typically. And so a common situation is something like this. This is so drawing a blank on what it's called, but anyway, the Circa 21 theater, they've got their 6 shows, and because they don't want any one of these things to be dominant, nothing on this card catches my attention. I have every show is competing for my attention. Circa 21 is competing for my attention, and the 30th anniversary is competing for my attention. So it's kind of a mismatch to me from a design standpoint. So I suggested to them that a way to deal with that situation is they could make it visually look as if the season is a unified element, so you're not looking at 6 individual things. You're looking at one thing, which is a season. And because it's their spectacular 30th season, then that's what that is. That's their spectacular 30th season. So I moved that up to the top. So we have a much easier time with the second layout, which is just a tweak from the first layout. It's not a complete rethinking, but it's just a little tweak that makes it, I think, much easier to comprehend what it is they're trying to communicate, which is we're talking about a season of plays. The third one that I want to get into is I was just talking about a little bit with the Mac theater, which is about flow. Readers want you to show them what to look at next. So once you've established what people are looking at, it's often it can be a common problem that you have a focal point at the Savoy. There's a lot of competition for what's going to be the focal point. But I think the balloon probably wins if you had to choose a winner. But then I don't know what to do from there. There's no visual cue to whether I should look at the text to the right, or should I look at the calendar underneath, or should I go look at what this star in the corner is doing. So we rethought this layout and added a photo of one of the performers, which now the picture of the man with the trumpet becomes the focal point, but it's very clear what I'm supposed to look at next. I'm supposed to go from him to Stomping at the Savoy, to look at the text about the show, and then come back around to look at the calendar, and then the prices, and then the phone number and the website. There is a tendency for people who read Western languages that if given left to their own devices, they will start at the top left, and they'll go to the right, and then they'll snake back down. They won't do like a typewriter and go over to the left again and start over. They'll curve and look. They'll snake their way through a page of layout back and forth. And so this fits the very natural pattern that most readers will do if like I say, if left to their own devices. The focal point's in the top left, and then the direction of view is to the right, is from the left to the right, and then from the right back to the left, and then when you get down to theater at San Pedro Square, then you naturally go back to the right again. So it works with the people's flow. If you're people will also accept easily, like being drawn to the center of a layout, and then having their eyes directed to go in a circle around the page. And they'll also accept top left-hand corner, but being forced to go down. Typically, people will go down, and then they'll come back up the middle column. Let's say it's a 3-column layout, they'll come back up the middle column, and they'll go down the next column. Just naturally is what people are most comfortable with, and that's and if you encourage them to follow that, then their anxiety and their interest in reading what you're presenting to them will be maintained. They won't be annoyed at you for not giving them any cues as to what to look at next. Here's another example. This is an example of the vertical orientation where we have St. Luke's Chamber Ensemble. So again, I don't know what exactly I'm supposed to look at first here, whether it's the flower image, the title, the photos of the performers. With flow in mind, just a small rearrangement of things gives me a very clear, I think, uh, path to follow. Now the focal point appears to be the image of the flower in the top left-hand corner. Then I know I'm supposed to look at the title and go down, read the testimonial, and then my eye is attracted over to the images of the performers, and then I look at the text about the shows. And so I understand as a reader what the flow is intended to be. Also in this brochure, they have this spread about these 3 different venues that they work at, and I don't know what to look at first, and I don't know which set of information goes with which picture. So a very simple solution to this is just to add a box around the one in the middle to make it clear. Okay, I see the text on the right about Brooklyn Museum. That must be the Brooklyn Museum to the left, and the Morgan Library is the photo in the top right, and so on. And now I have a place to begin. I'm going to look at the one that's in the box first. And I just glancing at this page, I can understand, oh, dates and locations. Okay, I can understand there's 3 different locations here. I don't have to take even a second to comprehend what it is being communicated just with that addition of that box. So now we're getting on to the 4th issue that designers, layout artists have to deal with. And that is my rule of thumb is that if everything is bold, nothing is bold. There's often a temptation among people who are presenting multiple performances or multiple different productions to say, well, I can't make any one of them dominant, or I have to give them all, they're all just as important. And so in this particular case, this is a very common situation where the Cultural Development Foundation in Memphis says, well, we have all of these events going on, and apparently we have a guy who learned how to vignette photos in Photoshop, so we're going to make all of them equally as exciting. And so what you end up with is a room of people yelling at you instead of a conversation about what's coming up in our season. So a different piece they did, I thought, did a much better job of presenting this information, which was they allowed Wynton Marsalis to be the focal point, to be the entry point, the thing that tells me, okay, this is about jazz music, I understand. And then I can look at the dates and times and the titles for these other events that are going on, and I can comprehend it much better. I can take it in much better because I was given just a single person to talk to in the room, so to speak, rather than getting shouted at by all of these different shows. Let's see. There we go. Another example. Oops, I think I may have gone too far, but I thought these guys did a pretty good job of separating things. I thought this was a. Oh, there we go. Shoot. Okay, I'm sorry. On the cover of this brochure for this particular presenting theater, again, they had the problem of they couldn't decide what to make number one. They couldn't give a focal point, I think. So everything's bold. Subscribers save 34%. Season highlights. Buy concerts. It's like getting more than 2 free. Make time for great music. So everything is shouting at you, and so it's very hard to comprehend what's going on here. Whereas on the inside of the brochure, I thought they did a much better job of being very consistent and making sure that the first thing we see is the date of the event, which is in this case the 3rd, 4th. These are events taking place on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of the month, and the title, and then we see the artist who's performing, and then we see specifically what the program is, and so we're able to take in the information much more fully because there's a hierarchy to it. The most important things are the things that we look at, and the things that we want to know second or third or fourth are fed to us in that order. So I suggested to them a way of simplifying that cover that you just saw a moment ago would have been to make the slogan, "Make time for great music," more prominent so that it doesn't get lost, cut down on the number of photos and allow some of them to be significantly bigger than others, and cut down on the amount of marketing copy on the cover of the brochure because they kept repeating the same message. They repeated the same message about save 34% several times, which it did not, which just made, I think, made it lose its effectiveness. So we have it there, but we're not shouting it at people. Let's see. And just a small tweak to the information on the inside. I thought, they could have even done a little bit better by making the program information, in this case Schubert and Mahler, a different color than the rest of the text, would be even easier to comprehend all of the information that we're trying to take in. So a fifth point, which is related to the last one, is in order for something to pop, it needs to have something to pop out of. So a lot of times when people are doing a dynamic design, they want everything. They want photo vignettes, and they want slanted type, and they want action photography, and they want background images that are moving all over the place and stuff. And they feel like, well, this is, we got to keep people entertained when they're reading our piece. And what can end up happening if you do too much of that is that everything's chaos, and there's no and so there's no clue to the reader as to what should I be paying attention to, because there's too much going on. So in this particular case, I thought San Francisco did a pretty good job, where we know we're supposed to look. Our eyes are drawn to Michael Tilson Thomas, partly because he's only partly cut out of this photo, and there's a strong foundation, this nice big square image that is a foundation from which he is popping out of. And so the dynamism of that action is obvious to us because, again, there is a foundation. Just likewise with the players at the bottom, whose heads are poking into the image. It's effective because there's a nice solid foundation, the square image that Michael Tilson Thomas is in, for their heads to react against, and so I'm able to focus on it and feel the dynamism that's intended by that process. Another example is a theater company. The image of the actor kicking up his leg and throwing his arm up in the air and yelling is a very dynamic image, but the reason why it's dynamic is because the rest of the stage setting is static. So he's reacting against the table and the wall and the stage and the stool, and we're able to focus on what he's doing. So I thought that was a very successful image for that reason. If there had been another person doing the same thing, or if there had been if the artist laying this out had superimposed like some other photos on here, or put some ribbons or who knows what stars, it would have undercut the power of the image, because you would no longer have had a foundation for the actor to be popping out of. I love this Scottish opera image. Again, everybody knows what a face looks like. It's the most basic thing that humans know how to recognize. And so we're drawn in by this mesmerizing face of the singer, and then we notice that her eyelashes are water that are spouting out of her eyes, and so it's more effective, it's more meaningful to us as an image because we have this foundation of the very familiar image of someone's face for it to be popping out of. So now we're captivated, we're mesmerized by this. We're wondering, this is one of those rare cases when intrigue, I think, actually works. Oftentimes I'm asked, should the cover of my, I don't want to just have the picture of the maestro or a picture of a show. I want something intriguing on the cover, and sometimes people will go wrong with that because they'll put something that ends up just being confusing. Whereas I think this actually does work as intriguing because of the fact that it's that we can concentrate just on the one dynamic element of the picture and be drawn in by that. So I thought this was very successful. Another rule of thumb: different things should look different. Similar things should look similar. We've seen a little bit of this earlier, but it's just important to keep in mind that the people who are looking at your emails and your brochure and your website, they are becoming fluent in the language of marketing that you are speaking to them. So part of the structure that you create in your marketing pieces, part of your brand, in other words, is to to communicate to people in a way that they will come to understand what it is you're talking about. So you're using the same fonts, same color scheme, similar types of images from piece to piece, so that people become familiar with, and they can pick up on what it is you're trying to say very quickly and easily. So what problem with this particular orchestra brochure is that there just isn't enough difference between the solo performer, the names of the solo performers, the date, which are exactly the same font and weight and size, and then the sponsorship information down at the bottom. It's all the same. So as a reader, I find this harder to comprehend than it needs to be, because of the fact that different things are not different from each other, and similar things are not things are similar to each other that are not similar, because the name of the soloist and the name of the concert sponsor are not the same thing, and so I should be able to tell them apart more easily. So you can get a close up of that here, and then all I suggested to them, it doesn't have to be a major redo, but if they put the dates if they reverse the dates out of a black box, and then if they make the sponsorship tags normal weight, but in italic instead of being bold and the same as the names of the soloists, then it's easier for me just visually to understand the language that this layout artist is speaking in terms of what they're trying to communicate, and I can pick out the information much more easily, because I can get used to that things that are the size of Sibelius and Elgar and Tchaikovsky and so on. Okay, that's information about the concert program. Things that are bigger and bold, those are the soloists, and then things that are big and italics, okay, those are the sponsors. I can understand that and speak the language of the brochure, because there's been a consistency, and different things look different and similar things look similar. There's another close-up of it. So the final tip I wanted to give, or the final rule of thumb I wanted to give, issue I wanted to bring up, was about the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge is that you don't know what it's like not to know what you know. So it's very common for designers and marketing directors to put out an ad or a brochure or email that just is not as effective as it could be, maybe even sometimes confusing to the people who receive it, because they don't see it the way that a person who doesn't know what they know would see it. And that's often for example, years ago, there was a presenting venue that decided, they were going to do their entire brochure as a Mad Lib book. So every event was a Mad Lib, or it was written in, and so on. And the thing that they didn't, they were so enamored with this idea that they didn't realize that not only was this confusing to people, but they'd left out key information, like the address of the venue wasn't in this brochure, because they were so busy doing it as a Mad Lib. So it's always a good idea to keep in mind that the people you're marketing to are people who don't know anything about you. Now, you may object to that. I get objections to that whenever I say it. People say, well, we know our audience, and our audience, we get the same people back every year, blah, blah, blah. But see, those people are not the people you're actually marketing to. You don't have to create a big fancy brochure or have a big fancy website to attract people who already like you. They're already coming, and they will more than likely continue coming, just if you send them a letter or a postcard and tell them that it's time to renew their season subscriptions, and most of them will just do it. Or the ones that are going to do it at all will just do it when they don't need all the fancy marketing. The people you're marketing to are people who don't know you, and so you sometimes have to explain things or make things clear that you don't have to make clear to anybody in the office or to any of your regulars who've been subscribing for 20 years, but you do have to make clear to people who are just in town who are new in town, or are just there for the summer, or who are just now have sent the kids off to college and they finally have time to go to the theater, or whatever the situation may be. those are the people that you're marketing to, and those are the people you always need to keep in mind, which is why it's a good practice to test all of your marketing materials and your messages by showing them to people who are unrelated to your organization. I can't tell you the number of times I've been doing a consultation. So like at these at the Arts Reach conferences and other conferences that I go to, and also in my own line of work, I will end up consulting with people about their brochures and looking at it and kind of giving them my feedback on what I think is working well and what I think is not. And it's amazing how often somebody I've never met before, don't know who they are, I've purposely not looked at the organization they're coming from, and they just hand me their brochure, and I'll say, "Oh, you're an opera company," and they'll go, "No, we're a dance company." And I go, "Well, how come your brochure says you're an opera company?" Because when I looked at it, the images that they used on the cover looked like images I would expect to see on the cover of an opera company, or a presenting theater will give me their brochure, and I'll go, "Oh, you're a dance company," and I'll go, "No, we have 100 events, only some of them are dance." And I go, "Yeah, but you featured a dancer on your cover." Of course, oftentimes the only decent photos that you receive as a presenting theater are from the dance companies, and so it's a temptation. But there was nothing on the cover, but if there's nothing on the cover of the brochure that communicates the idea of that they're a venue, not an artistic organization, then they can't blame me if I get the wrong impression, as somebody who doesn't know anything about them. And so it's always valuable to show your materials to people who are complete strangers and just ask them the open-ended question of, well, what does this give you? What does this tell you? What can you get from looking at this? And ask them, because it'll be very interesting what they have to say and the order in which they say it and how they say it, because it's a reflection of their interaction with the piece, the mocked up piece that you've given them, or the mocked up web page that you're showing them, and it's invaluable to you to be able to figure out, what is it like for people who don't know what you know. So with that sort of foundation to this, I wanted to go over the 3 case studies that I had at the last conference. These are 3 organizations that sent me their brochures ahead of time, and I did a full evaluation. I'm going to share with you some of what I told them. I had a whole pages of notes that I gave each one of them about their pieces, but I'll show you their pieces and link it back to what we've just been talking about. So one of the organizations.
Henry, before we launch into this, I just want to remind people that they can type in any questions that they have as we're going through your presentation. Type them into the question box and send them on over, and we'll take care of them when Henry's finished talking about these 3 case studies. Okay? Thank you.
All right. Yes, cool. Yeah, and just to reiterate, yes, if you have any questions at all, I hope you brought some questions, because everybody comes at this differently. Everybody has unique situations. So there's a lot of familiarity. I've seen a lot of the same things, but everybody's organization is a little bit different, and challenges are a little bit different. So this was the case of the Inland Valley Repertory Theater Company. And you probably can tell, just based on what we were just talking about, my main problem with this was that it violated rule number 2, which was every layout has to have a focal point. My expectation, I talked to one of the owners of the company a little bit, and I feel that maybe I was right about this, that the designer of the IVRT across the top was really proud of having created this and didn't want to let it go. But the problem with it is that it's very busy, and I can't really read it very well, so it doesn't come across as a logo, and it really does a much less effective job of communicating what it is and why I should care than the production photo below of the woman with the sad, happy, delighted, whatever expression on her face. And so I think that this was a case of, like Whitman would say, you had to be willing to kill your darlings. I think the IVRT with the photos in it just had to go, and this woman had to be the thing that we focused on. So I did an alternative cover for them using the same material, the same layout, where we just went back to their regular logo and put it at the bottom, so that the very first thing people would see would be this sort of intriguing photo that is where she's looking up at Inspirational Community Theater since 1990. So I know what it is. I don't quite know why I should care, but I didn't want to, I wasn't redoing it completely. I was just tweaking it. On the inside, now they face a situation that, of course, almost every theater company and dance company or the opera company faces, which is when you have to start advertising your season long before you have any production photos to use. Or if you do have some, because you've cast some of the shows, you never have all of them, and so you're faced with this issue of, what do I use? And so they, like a lot of people, they use production photos from past seasons in their brochure just to give the idea of the energy of what it is they're talking about, which is fine, but it works. It's successful a lot of times, especially if the production photo is somehow connects to the same idea as the show. This was a couple where it wasn't very successful. First of all, the on the left, it's a letter from the leaders of the organization, and talking to the subscribers about what's coming up in the season and reminiscing about the past and so on. And you can't help as a reader but think, well, this man in the wig with the fan in his hand is that Frank, or is that Donna? How does that relate to the information? And you're confused. So it would have been much better in this particular case to have a photo of the two people who are writing the letter, or no photo at all, rather than be misleading with this photo. Now, on the other side, the Damn Yankees spread, I don't think any reader would think that this photo is from Damn Yankees, and they're not going to be bothered by it, because this information over here is about a show, and so we're willing to accept that we're going to use production photos. I think they probably could have chosen a better, photo that would give more of the feel of Damn Yankees, but it's perfectly fine. A couple of other problems they had in their brochure. This is the curse of knowledge issue, where one of the things they do in their season is they have a stage readings of plays that they do at a local restaurant. So in this case, this season they're doing Crimes of the Heart, Lost in Yonkers, The Gin Game, as you see on the page on the left. The only problem is nowhere on this page do they explain that that's what this is. And so unless you are knowledgeable, unless you've been around theaters enough to intuit that if they say Reader's Theater Series, that means it's a stage reading of a play, then you're going to be completely confused by this. And so it's somewhere on this page they needed to explain that we're going to join you for dinner and we're going to do a stage reading of the play. It had to spell that out because, again, the people that you're marketing to are the people who don't know anything. The people who've been to one of these things in the past don't even need this page in order to know about it. Likewise, with their camp and outreach program, again, they didn't explain what it is. I mean, I kind of know what a camp and outreach program is, but I don't know. Is it during the summer? Is it after school? Is it something that you bring into schools for free, or is it something that we have to pay for? I don't know any. These testimonials that they gave and the photos they gave just don't inform me about what it is. So for them, they know everything about it because they're the one doing it. But for people to whom this is new information, a little bit more explanation was necessary. Okay, so that's the IVRT. Now we're going on to, this is a series of things from the Jewish Women's Theater. So what you're looking at on the screen right here is an email blast that they sent out about this show called Annie Corson, Famous Actress. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is because there's several other things that they did to advertise this show where they used this faded back photo of Annie Corson in the background behind, like in the background of an ad and so on. But in every other instance that they did it, and I'm sorry I should grab one to show you, but I forgot. It was relatively effective because there wasn't very much text and the image was able to be a little bit darker than it is here. So now I look at this email blast and I don't know what to look at first. I don't know there's no focal point, but it's also I can hardly read. I can hardly figure out what this is, and I'm very distracted by this image that's behind because if I haven't seen this before, I don't know what that is. I doubt that many of you looking at that immediately knew that was the photo of a woman until I said it. So I said to them, much better would have been just forget the idea of screening the photo behind the text. Just have a photo of Annie Corson. And so do it. So this is a better way to do it on the right. Because now the photo of Annie Corson can be the focal point, the thing that I look at first. The only other significant difference I made was I made sure that every time the show was mentioned that her full name Annie Corson was used, because in their version they referred to it a couple times as Annie, which of course is very confusing because there's a much more famous show called Annie. So a little minor change, but I think makes all the difference in terms of comprehending this and being intrigued by it, and being interested in it. And I did the top a couple different ways. So you saw the so one way to do the top, but a more email friendly way to do it is this second way, where all of that text could be included in the text of the email, which is better for search engine optimization. So this is a postcard that the same group does regarding a series of shows that they put on in people's homes. And again, the problem here, there's no focal point. Everything kind of blends together. I have a hard time telling things apart from each other. And the header, the 2018 at-home salon theater season, gets lost because it's so similar in weight to everything else. And so I just said, with some small changes, we can take the 2018 and put it above so that we can make the text bigger. And then if we put a tinted box behind the three shows, again, like on that earlier example from Circuit 21 Theater, we can present these three shows as a unit, and so I can focus on it and understand it better because I'm looking at a set of things rather than three individual things that are all competing for my attention. Another e-blast that they send out that their venue sends out, the Braid, about shows coming up, and I thought it was perfectly fine. This is perfectly, I've done so many of these, and there's kind of only so many ways to do this kind of thing. It's perfectly okay. The biggest problem that I had with it, again, was the heading gets lost because the type is so small, or is too small compared to everything else. And it's too easy for me to just skip over these three photos at the top and start looking at the text really. So I have a harder time comprehending what it is and why I should care, because I'm not really given a very good introduction to it at the top. It's kind of forgettable. So I suggested that it's very easy to just make what's happening a lot bigger than at the Braid, so that I understand this is okay. It's what's happening, and then I moved the slogan "Wishing everyone a very happy New Year" to the bottom, so that the photos would be sandwiched in between those two things, and I can focus on them more. And the header ends up being a much more successful focal point than it was previously. Then the third case study was for the Wheel Hall at the Green Music Center at Sonoma State University. So again, it's a presenting sponsor. They bring a lot of different shows to the campus, and so like every group like that, they're faced with the issue of, we have to make it clear to people that we put on a variety of shows, and so the most common way to solve that problem is to have some sort of a collage of photos or series of photos on the cover. That's pretty standard, though. The problem here was that they were also, that it's all kind of jumbled together, and there's just everything is competing against everything else, so I can't concentrate as a reader on what these words are in the middle because I'm too distracted by these photos behind, and I have a hard time reading them a little bit. Because one of the other things that they have going on here, in behind this kind of Hollywood Squares grid format for the text, they've got a line drawing of their venue. Now, if I've never been there, again, you're marketing to people who don't know anything about you. If I've never been there, I have no idea what all those lines are, and and really, even if I have been there, they do nothing to sell me on the idea of coming. I'm not coming because of the venue. I'm coming because of what you're offering. So it was a case of, no doubt, a case of where, somebody, maybe, who knows, might have been a board member, might have been the artistic director, somebody might have done this line drawing and was just so committed to it that they insisted it had to be on there. And that was a case where the marketing director should have, if this, in fact, if I'm right about this situation, should have said, no. The most important thing is to communicate the fact that we are a venue and we're putting on a series of shows of varying types, and everything else is unimportant by comparison. So I suggested to them that if they wanted to stick with the Hollywood Squares kind of format, that was fine, but they just simplify it a lot. So I suggested that they do this. So this is exactly the same text, and the boxes are the same and everything. It's just that the instead of the photos being behind the text, they're confined to their own cut lines, and we got rid of the line drawing of the building. Other than that, this was a terrific. So here they are side by side. So at least in my humble opinion, I think the one on the right it does a much better job of communicating what they were trying to communicate, and is much more engaging for the reader, while not fundamentally changing the design that the artist started with. I'm just going to throw in a couple of notes. It's a very well done brochure. They do one of the things that I always recommend for presenting sponsors, which is to have in the brochure, usually in the beginning, a chronological season at a glance listing. So here's just a couple of columns of that listing, which I thought did a pretty good job of presenting this information, so that I can scan it. I can look for, okay, my aunt's coming into town, in mid-December. Okay, great. I can take her to go see the 30th anniversary of Windham Hills Winter Solstice, whatever. So I can interact with the information chronologically where that's appropriate, and then the order of things in the brochure later on was organized according to genre. One of the genres that I had a little bit of a problem with was this genre they called jazz and other. They threw in a blues, or a folk concert, and then they had Garrison Keillor. They just had a bunch of things lumped in to with their jazz programs. So I thought that was giving them short shrift. Another thing they did from a design standpoint was they had certain shows where they had a tie-in with MasterCard, and so they called them the MasterCard Performance Series, and they superimposed the MasterCard logo on the photos, which I thought made them look a little tacky, was a little distracting. And so I just thought a better way to deal with this from a design standpoint was to have the logos identify that it's a MasterCard Performance Series, still in a prominent location, but not superimposed on the photo. And then just be more explicit, more precise about what it is that this section was dealing with. So jazz, folk, and storytelling is just a better way of presenting that. Because again, you're putting yourself into the mind of the person who's reading it for the first time, who doesn't know any of this information, and trying to be as clear to them as possible about what it is you're trying to communicate to them. And that's it. That's all. Those are the case studies. And if you would like to follow up after this webinar with any questions, feel free to email me, arts@ruddle.com. If you want to send me a copy of your brochure and get my feedback on it, you're certainly welcome to do that. But in the meantime, we can have some questions. We have 5 or 6 minutes for some questions from you today. Thanks, John.
Okay, Henry, great job on that. I thought great insights, and here we go. Let's take some questions while we're at it. So go ahead and type in your question. You can ask anything goes regarding brochures, mailing, printing, graphics, you name it. Go ahead and send it on over and we'll take a shot at it. Okay, here's one. Is it important to have a theme for each season?
Well, I get that question a lot, and I say no. I don't think it's important. I don't think people are necessarily looking for there. I don't think it changes people's appreciation of the organization or the information much, unless the theme. The one exception is when the theme actually um, is actually meaningful to the content that's being presented. Probably the best one I saw, I've seen. Well, a couple come to mind. There was a theater company I used to work with, where their theme was twists and turns, and it's because every show that they were putting on that season either had a turn, like they did an all-female version of 1776, for example, or a twist. They had a couple of like whodunits with twist endings, and so everything fit that theme. The worst use of a theme is when it matches like 3 out of the 4 shows, and then you have this one orphan that doesn't fit with the theme. So, for example, there was I can't remember, it was an opera company's brochure, and I was thinking, wow, they did a great job on this theme because the theme was love, which is like an obvious theme for opera, I suppose. Every show in their season was about had at the heart typically a heroine who was obsessed with you know with had obsessive love for one of the other characters, except the last one. And so just, you guys, you gotta, I felt so bad for them that they had done this great job carrying out this theme and representing it graphically, and then there's this one clunker at the end which really had nothing to do with the theme. So if you're going to use a theme, make sure that it actually carries through. Otherwise, you're going to end up alienating people. But there really is no reason to use a theme per se, typically, because I don't think it adds anything in most cases.
Okay, keep those questions coming in. We have one more at this point, so we can take a few more if you want to send it in. We produce 6 shows a year, and we create a logo for each show. Should we make our marketing match the font and color scheme of the logo?
Well, that's a relatively common question. I get, how much, and what I always say is the most important branding that you have is the branding of the organization. So I think that you always have to be consistent with in how you present everything. Should the people who see it, whether it's on a poster or on a billboard or in something they get in the mail, or if they run across your website or they get an email, they should be able to tell immediately that it's from you. And so the show logo is secondary or even tertiary to the branding of the organization as a whole. And specifically when you're dealing with a season brochure kind of situation, um, sure, every show will have different fonts that are representing the title of the show in the show logo, but that should be the only use of those fonts. You should have everything else, again, like I said earlier, one of the tips, different things should look different, similar things should look similar. So the dates of the show should always be the same font, weight, and size for every show, no matter what the show logo looks like, for example. So that's how I would handle that situation.
Okay, well, I guess there aren't any other questions today. I want to repeat what Henry mentioned. We are recording this webinar. We do put them in the knowledge base along with a lot of other things like presentations from conferences, articles from our newsletter, et cetera, et cetera. So make sure you check out the Arts Reach knowledge base on our website at artsreach.com. That's a benefit of being a premium member of Arts Reach. And also, I want to mention we have 3 conferences coming up the first part of 2018. We'll have lots of sessions just like the one we had today and many, many others. It's called the National Arts Marketing Development and Ticketing Conference. We have one in March in New York. We have one in San Francisco this year in May, and we'll be in Toronto in June. So that's all on the Arts Reach websites. The early bird deadline for the New York one is December 31. So you want to register by December 31 for the lowest pricing on your registration package. Okay, thanks for tuning in today. Thanks for a wonderful presentation, Henry. And I'm amazed you made it all in less than an hour. So congratulations.
Thank you, John. And thank you,
All right,
everybody, for coming.
Right, we'll see everybody next time. Bye-bye.